All right. I think we'll jump in. I know Rick and I were chatting, so we're 2 minutes behind schedule, but that's okay. We'll let a few folks filter in the room as we go and go ahead and get started. But of course, thank you guys for being here. We're really excited for this patient leader webinar focusing on virtual support groups. This is a topic, especially since COVID, that has been a big question for a lot of patient leaders. How do I continue to connect with my community, even though we're used to doing it maybe on the computer? What's a way to create that emotional and peer-to-peer connection, basically? So we're really excited to have Rick Davis with us today to go through this. He's pretty humble, but I'll say he is a pro when it comes to moderating these support calls. He was actually diagnosed back in 2007 with prostate cancer. As you can imagine, he went through the entire patient journey, the ups and downs, and with that kind of unveiled the passion of really supporting fellow patients. I'll let Rick speak to it, but he kind of found that there was not that much support out there for men that were having these complex diagnoses, so that kind of led him to the path that he is today, a nationally recognized patient advocate and the founder of AnCan, which is an organization that provides accessible, inclusive, and virtual peer-to-peer support groups with the goal of doing it in all condition areas. Today in the presentation, you'll see the areas that they focus on and that they're expanding to. So they are without a doubt, a growing organization. Rick has been doing moderating virtual support groups for almost 10 years. So definitely has a lot to share, and we have a lot to learn from him. So with that being said, I will turn it over to him and let him dive into his best tips and practices for creating a virtual support group. Thanks, Rick, for being here today.
Thank you, Kristen, who I just christened the princess of social media, because she does such a great job promoting these WeGo gatherings. Hello, everybody. I am really honored that WeGo asked me to do this, and excited to talk to you all about the value of virtual support groups and virtual meetings, actually, in general. Some of you may know me. You may have seen me at Healthy Voices or dialogued with me in other places. So if I do know you, a big hello. And if I don't know you, I'd love to get to know you. So I want to talk to you, first of all, a little bit about some history and how this all came about. I was diagnosed, as Kristen said, back in 2007. I joined a physical support group. It was very helpful to me. And around 2009, 2010, I quit that group. And a very dear friend of mine, who I'd met through supporting him, and was a neighbor and was very experienced in video support, in video meetings, said to me, you know, you should continue doing this. We should set up a TV channel, and we'll call it Rick TV. Well, I thought about that, and I thought, if this is for prostate cancer, we can call it something like Rick TV, something that rhymes with Rick TV, but it won't be Rick TV. You guys can figure out where that goes. But it made me realize two things. One, I didn't want a TV channel, because I don't just want people looking at me, and I don't want to be talking at people. I want to be talking with people. And that what we really wanted to do was to continue this support group that I'd been doing, but do it virtually online. And I had already realized that there were some huge advantages of virtual groups. There was a question, I think somebody said, are we better off with virtual groups or physical groups? Physical groups are great, but the problem with physical groups is there are certain people who cannot attend. Why? Because, first of all, they may be geographically remote. So, for example, in my own case, I live 40 miles south of Tucson in a very rural area. If I want to go to a support group in Tucson, it's an hour drive up, and then at the end of the night, it's an hour drive back. I'm not going to do it. And there are people who are way more remote than I am. Secondly, you've got people who are physically disabled and they can't get a support group, even if they want to get to a support group. And thirdly, you've got people who are socially disabled. They don't want to be in a room with a bunch of other people. They don't want to be in open spaces. Maybe they suffer from some type of mental sickness that doesn't make them comfortable with a bunch of people. So I felt if we could create a remote support group, that would work fine. I looked on the web, there were two. This was probably around 2010. There was one for postpartum depression and there was one for dieting. And I felt that we really needed to put something together. I looked around and I was pretty active on Inspire at that time. And there was a telephone group running out of Minneapolis for prostate cancer. And I joined that. Well, pretty quickly, that group grew. And to a point where it was too big, we had to split it up. And it grew again, and it was too big, and we split it up again into various stages of prostate cancer because it wasn't a great idea to have people that had just been diagnosed with people with end-stage disease, and we had enough people to split the group. And then around 2014, I was actually working on a proprietary video platform, just like we're talking on right now, where you could see other people, because there really wasn't much available. What was available at that time was very expensive. We'll come to that. And I found GoToMeeting, and we moved on to GoToMeeting. And at the time, Zoom was literally just starting down on the peninsula. I was living in the Bay Area in the North Bay. Thank goodness I couldn't get the funding from our own proprietary platform, and that was just as well. Then in 2016, we needed money, and so we decided to create as a 501c3, a nonprofit, and which is how AnCan came about, which is short for Answer Cancer Foundation. We are now known as AnCan because we're not only cancer. Although we're still officially Answer Cancer Foundation, we serve other conditions. We've just grown from there, and we'll talk about how we've grown. So the first thing I think that we need to do is talk a little bit about technology. And as I mentioned, you saw our history. We started with telephone conference calls. We then looked at how we could get online. And the platforms in that day, and some of those are still available today, like WebEx and BlueJeans. Those of you who are on HUV, on the Healthy Voices virtual conference, use BlueJeans. BlueJeans was available to us back in 2015, but they're expensive. And at the time, GoToMeeting was not expensive. It was accessible. And so we went with GoToMeeting. We've since compared all of the platforms that are available. We did that last year. Zoom is probably a better platform than GoToMeeting. It was before COVID a little more expensive. I cannot tell you now because we haven't priced it in the last 3 months. For us, because we had a lot of people already used to GoToMeeting in our groups, we didn't want to switch. So the inertia of switching was too great. So we decided to stick with GoToMeeting. If you're starting from scratch and you're not working with us and you can afford Zoom, it's probably a little bit better because it has more, only because it has more bells and whistles. So how do we at AnCan use our virtual room? So we run 23 monthly virtual support meetings. I'll tell you more about what those are momentarily. We also use our room for personal navigation, so one-on-one navigation. And in our system, we ask, our meetings are free and they're drop-in. We don't ask for donations to attend a meeting. Our philosophy is make it as easy as possible for anybody to attend any meeting. And that is a condition of anybody that we work with. But if you want personal navigation, then we do ask for a donation. And by the way, we work with moderators in other groups to rev share that donation. But we want people to recognize that we, as moderators and navigators, our time is valuable. And we have a rack rate, but we never turn anybody away. Somebody wants to give us $5, that's fine, but we want that acknowledgement that they're using our time. We use our room for new group development and for training. That's how we bring you as new partners and new moderators up to speed so that the first time you open a meeting, you are comfortable. We use it for our board meetings and for various project meetings. And then until now, we've been using it for webinars. GoToMeeting is not a great webinar platform. You're limited to 150 people. We've got 8 webinars planned between now and the end of the year, and we're probably going to purchase GoToWebinar for that for a whole bunch of different reasons. Well, there you go. So what's the difference between a virtual meeting and a physical meeting? There is a really big difference, and a lot of people don't get it. They think, oh, because I've moderated in a physical session, it's easy for me to move to a virtual session. I love this quote that I found when I was preparing for a presentation back in April. And it says, as you can see, video chats mean we need to work harder to process nonverbal cues like facial expressions, the tone and pitch of the voice, and body language. Paying more attention to these consumes a lot of energy, and it does. So after I've done an hour and a half or 2-hour meeting, which some of our meetings are, I'm ready for a drink. I mean, I got to tell you that the concentration that is required is significant. When you don't have visual cues, when you have limited audio cues or modified audio cues, you've got to work a lot harder as a moderator. You also don't see people coming in and out of the room that evidently. It can be obscured. And you've also got issues over the meeting size. So less than 5 people, easy. It's like sitting around a kitchen table. 5 to 15 people, that's probably your sweet spot. The real sweet spot, probably 8 to 12. But 5 to 15 works. You get over 15, it's tough. And you get over 20, and you're working very hard. And what we've always done at AnCan, when we've gotten consistently over 20, meaning 3 or 4 meetings in a row over 20 people, is we've split the group. We have added another group and maybe divided that group by the type of disease or the stage of disease or age or what have you. But we know with consistently more than 20 people, we've got to split the group and try and bring it back down. To get started, choose a platform that's really easy to enter. Very, very important. Some of these fancy platforms like WebEx and BlueJeans are not as easy to enter as Zoom or GoToMeeting. Choose a platform that has telephone access, because there are people out there, and especially older people, who are technophobes. And you have to make your group very, very easy to get into. So if somebody doesn't want to enter the group because they're afraid of technology and going online, let them pick up the telephone and let them dial in. We ask our moderators to use and enable their cameras, have video, because when I see you and you see me, there's already an intimacy that isn't there if you're using the telephone. In the past, and it'll continue this way, we've never insisted on other people using their video. It's totally optional. Somebody's having a bad hair day, or they're not feeling good, we don't need to see them. What we found, which is really interesting as a result of COVID, is that people are much more comfortable enabling their video. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday we held a group which 6 months ago we might have had 3 or 4 people with their video icons and probably 5 people on telephones. Yesterday, we had 15 people in the room, 3 on telephones, and 10 were using their video icons, because people are much more comfortable now with the concept of a virtual room. So now is a great time to start a virtual support group. And lastly, there's a lot of multitasking that goes on when you're running a virtual support group. So you may want to share a link. You may have to name somebody who called in on the telephone. There's a bunch of different things that have to be done. It's very important to have a team of moderators, to have co-moderators, so that if you're distracted for a minute for whatever reason, you've got somebody else who can jump in, who can take over the reins whilst you're doing whatever it is that needs doing to keep that group running smoothly. So again, we ask when we start with new people to try and put a team of moderators together. When you start the meeting, when you actually begin the meeting, we recommend you allow time to aggregate. You've probably noticed people don't get to virtual meetings on time. And there's nothing more frustrating than you've started a meeting and somebody comes in and says, "Oh, can you hear me?" or "Can you see me?" We don't want that. So we found it better to wait between 5 and 10 minutes. We get everybody together and then we start. Be sure that if somebody calls in, you identify them if they want to be identified. If they don't, that's fine. We don't ask anybody to share their name or their identification if they're not comfortable doing it. But if they are, it's good to identify them, largely because if somebody's coming in on the telephone, they're only going to be identified as caller number 1, caller number 2, and you want to see who's speaking, and that will show up on your moderating panel. So by giving those people a name, you can see who it was, and hopefully you've got a co-moderator who's filling in the names whilst you're keeping the meeting moving. In terms of ground rules, often comes up, yes, it's good to set some rules of decorum and how people ask questions, but what I think you'll find and what we found is that after several meetings, people just know, and new people coming in tend to follow. And if you have a new person who comes in who's interrupting all the time, then you just have to speak up as a moderator, which you can do, and ask them to wait until you get to them. But by and large, decorum is good. If you go to our YouTube channel and you can play some of the meetings that we do, record some of our meetings with the knowledge of the participants, of course, because people want to listen later, and you can listen to some of those meetings and you'll hear that by and large they run much more smoothly than you would anticipate. The other thing that you want one of your moderators to do is to monitor the background noise and to mute anybody that is creating background noise. They may not even realize it. And then of course, switch them back on if they want, if they're going to speak. But that again is another task that that you can assign to one of your other moderators. Planning the meeting, keep the check-ins short, because it's very easy to go through an hour and a half with check-ins, and I mean that probably drives us all nuts. So if you are going to have check-ins, be sure that they are quick. We got a couple of questions about should we have an agenda, shouldn't we have an agenda? That's very much up to the meeting moderator. If you are going to talk about an issue that you want people prepared for, you must have an advance agenda. If the meeting is going to be a spontaneous meeting where the group responds to people that have questions for them, it isn't so important. Our format for the prostate cancer groups that we meet is pretty much set. So we welcome new people, they get the platform, they get the floor first for 10-15 minutes. And then, as you'll see, we run down and we find out who needs time, but I will come to that. we'll hold off of that for a second. Well, I guess I have come to it right now. Yes, it's the next thing I wanted to say. What we will do is we will take a list of everybody who's in the room, and we will, after the new people have gotten done, we will ask who needs time. And we specifically say who needs time. We don't say, do you have a question? Because some people don't have a question. They want to make a statement. And if you ask them who needs time, they say, I don't. If you ask them if they have a question, they say no, but they do need time. The new participants we handle first. We know how many people want to speak, and we can divide up that balance of that time. And that's what makes for a well-organized support meeting with the moderator keeping an eye on the clock, knowing how many more people they have to introduce. Some top tips. Be a very good listener as a moderator. Try and hear who's trying to get in. And then after you've told person A that they have the floor, remember that person B also wanted to speak. You can come back to them next time. You're listening all the time for those voices. You have to be able to recognize voices too. You have to have a good ear, a discerning ear. Another great quote that I found when I was preparing for this last meeting was from an INSEAD professor. And he said, silence creates a natural rhythm in a real life conversation. However, when it happens in a video call, you become anxious about the technology. See what I mean? How many of you thought, oh, something's just happened? And I maybe paused for 3 seconds there. So you have to avoid dead air. It makes everybody very, very nervous. I saw Christian thought, oh my gosh, what's happening here? Oh, what's happening? Did we lose him? Did we lose him? No, you didn't lose me. Now, if Kristen was looking at me in a meeting face to face, she wouldn't bother her if I didn't say anything for 3 seconds. But the technology introduces another element. We love to involve everybody. Somebody asked a question, how do you involve people? How do people buy in? One way we do it is by our moderators knowing our participants. So if somebody asks, let's say that we've got a meeting that is a technical meeting and people are asking about treatments, and somebody says, well, I've just been given this drug and how does this drug work and what have you, and I know that another person in the room has used that drug, I will not answer the question, even if I know the answer. I would much rather turn to that person in the virtual room and say, Joe, weren't you on that medication a year ago? Share how it affected you. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get participants to talk to each other without the moderator. So we become like a tugboat and the Queen and the QE2. So we're pushing a little here and a little there, trying to make the meeting move the way we want to get it. But when people are talking with each other and the meeting has its own speed and its own inertia, that is terrific for us. That's exactly what we want. We recommend you use the chat window. You can use it for a couple of things. You can use it to share links, URLs. In GoToMeeting, it's brilliant because if you put in a URL, it's immediately live. You can click on it, it comes up in your browser. You can use it to talk to your other co-moderators. Just send messages to them, but be very careful that the message goes only to them and it doesn't go to everyone, because that can be very embarrassing, as I can attest to. So, you know, if you've got somebody who, for example, a participant who's talking too much, I may send a message to one of my other moderators and ask them to jump in to stop that person, because I don't want to do it. But it's no good if that message goes out to everyone, as you can imagine. So be very careful with the chat window. Make sure it goes to, your message goes to who you want it to go to. if you haven't gathered in these chat windows, you can send a message individually to a participant, or you can send it to everybody. And another thing that I do is I keep a good list of my follow-up items, because I may say during the meeting, oh, I'll connect A with B, or oh, I'll send you this link or that link. So I write that all down, so after the meeting, I know what I promised to do. So a quick look at where we are today as AnCan. We run 23 meetings a month right now, 9 different conditions. You can see them all on there. Several of our conditions have more than one meeting. Prostate cancer has 9 meetings a month. Sarcoidosis, which is a recent group, has 3 meetings a month. Several other of the groups have a couple of meetings a month. So we are growing, and we're growing fast. On the table coming soon, I think we'll have a thyroid cancer group. We just today went out to see if there's interest in a UK Euro time zone male breast cancer group, and there is. So that will be starting. We're talking about a UK Euro sarcoidosis group, a CRPS group, and possibly a lupus group. And we are open to any group that wants to come to us. We would love to work with you. We love to collaborate. The reason we have to have separate UK Euro groups is because of the time zone. So if we have a meeting that starts at 8 o'clock Eastern, that doesn't work in Europe. It does work in the Far East. So we will get Aussies and people from Thailand, Japan into our groups because it's the next day. But for Europeans, we have to have a different meeting time for them, and which is why we're finding that we possibly need more groups. So if you would like to partner with us, this is what you need. A moderating team of at least 2 people, and sarcoidosis has up to 10. The more people you have, the easier it is. If you need to take a break, you can't make a meeting, you've got backup people. You need really good social media coverage or a very good mailing list. We love to collaborate with people that have mailing lists. They're usually nonprofits. Nonprofits don't like to collaborate. It's difficult. But we will respect your list as a nonprofit. We will not be fundraising from your list. We have a workaround for that. And you should not be concerned about coming to work with us, to collaborate with us, because you are protective of your list. We will work around you. And if you're a rare disease, this is a perfect forum for you, because there aren't enough people in any one given location to put together a support group as a rare disease. And this is a way to bring people together, and sarcoidosis has proven that, and male breast cancer is a rare disease. Breast cancer isn't a rare disease, but there are very few men with breast cancer. So that is a very good way to gather different people from around the country, around the world in a forum. These are just some of the people that we partner with, and we're very grateful for their partnership. We love working with other people. If you collaborate with us, we will provide free, no cost to you, the video chat platform. We can provide some other platforms too if you need it. We can help you with the mailing list if you want us to. We'll provide best practice training. We will give you handouts with to-do lists to get you started, with a cheat sheet to help you moderate. And we will provide you with whatever media exposure we can provide you with, which we have as AnCan. But remember, we don't know your community. You know your community, and you have to get that message out to your community. With that said, we did get some questions. That's all I have formally. And I'm just going to run through a couple of these questions that I may not have touched. And if I don't get to your question, stick it in the chat window, and Kristen will come back to me with it. So somebody wanted to know, and it's a very good question, what virtual support platforms are HIPAA protected? I know that Zoom is for sure. I'm not certain about GoToMeeting. What is important is that if you are peer-to-peer, you do not need to be HIPAA protected. And we are peer-to-peer. As I said earlier on, I think, and if I didn't, I should have done, the most valuable information a patient can get, in our view, is from another peer. They've been through it. They know the questions that you should ask their doctor, because they're the questions they forgot to ask their doctor. And the information that comes peer-to-peer is the best. If you're peer-to-peer, you don't have to be HIPAA protected. If you're not peer-to-peer, in other words, if your moderator has some sort of professional health license, you do. And so I would, in that case, I don't think that we can work with you. In fact, I would say we won't work with you because we want to remain peer-to-peer. That is a very important aspect of how AnCan presents itself to the world. I'm just looking at this, I'm just looking here at the questions. Let's see. Somebody asked about passwords. Is it good to have passwords? We like our meetings to be drop-in and easy to enter. So deliberately, we don't want passwords and login security. If you want login security, we can work with you to create that, but I'm not sure that it works that well for a lot of virtual support groups. Somebody else asked in that context about safe spaces and how do you make your virtual group a safe space? The smaller the group, the safer the space. And you have to be very clear up front that this is a safe space. What is said in this room stays in this room, and it's not to be repeated without permission. But by and large, we have never had an issue with safe space. One occasion recently, which we resolved later, we do record our group, some of our groups, not all of our groups. We do that. It's the moderator's choice. If the moderator wants it recorded, we will record it and we will post it on our YouTube channel, and they will post it wherever they want to post it, because a lot of times people want to listen in later. That clearly isn't exactly a safe space, but it is a choice and it is preferred by moderators. By the way, if you work with us as a moderator, you own the room. We don't influence what you put into that room. As long as it's correct and professional, that is fine by us. I mean, we don't want you coming to us with a group and using it to tell dirty jokes and use bad language. We've actually had a situation kind of like that, and we separated from that group and we created our own group. But by and large, you can make your group an emotional group, you can make it a technical group, you can mix the two, you can use it for presentations. We don't tend to do that, but we have some of our collaborators that do, or you can make it for discussion. But we want you to really own that group. Let's see, anything else that, what's the best way to stop a person monopolizing a group? Well, just remember that you as the moderator have the right to jump in at any time, or your co-moderator. And if you feel somebody is not observing the decorum of the group, it's up to you to tell them. You can't complain later because it was your responsibility as the moderator to take charge. Let's see, anything else? I think I've covered most of the. Kristen, have I covered everything?
You have covered a ton. Yeah, we'll jump into a few more. But first, I just want to say, of course, thank you. I know I was taking a lot of notes myself, so I'm sure many of our viewers were as well. Lots of good information here as people begin to start virtual moderating more support groups, for sure. So I know you did kind of just answer this one with the monopolizing here, but yeah. Exactly, you know, Daniel said, sometimes moderators are too polite and conversations can get out of hand. what suggestions do you have for being polite, professional, and stern? So maybe in that moment, you're saying, you know, you need to do something in that moment rather than after the call and complaining, but what are some ways you can kind of direct the conversation? Because I know that's something I think I definitely struggle with sometimes when I'm moderating. So do you have any tips on that?
I think what we found, and this is helpful, after you've been doing this a while, is that if you are a moderator, and you start talking, other people will stop and let you talk, even if they're in the middle, out of respect to the moderator. But if they don't, and this happens, remember, you always have the power of the mute. As the organizer, you can mute somebody. I've probably had to do that 6 or 7 times since I've been working with GoToMeeting in 6, 7. It doesn't happen that often, but if I can't get somebody to be quiet, if they won't listen, I don't have a problem muting them.
And I know with Zoom, at least I won't stand for all platforms. I know Zoom, you can even kick someone out of the meeting. So if they are going really dirty with the jokes or something, you can kick someone out.
You can. I will say we've never kicked anybody out of a meeting that I've been involved with, but there's always a first time.
Right? Yeah, let's hope not.
Behave, Kristen. There's always the first time.
It's not me, guys.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So then we do have one about if you are going to record the meeting, which I know a lot of people tend to do. I know a lot of people ask for replays even for this call. Do you have to get consent from the members of the call before recording? Yes.
We do not get a waiver or a written waiver or consent. What we do is we advise them in writing. So you say, well, how do you advise them in writing? Okay. Before all of our groups, AnCan moderated groups, and a bunch of our other groups, we send out a reminder, an email reminder, old technology, but it works. We have in that email reminder that we record the groups. Secondly, it's on our website. If you go to the page of that group, it says these groups are recorded. If you have an issue with that, please let us know ahead of time. I've had people that use pseudonyms. I've had people that just don't want to be identified and they tell me ahead of time, and I make sure not to use their name in the group. But there are workarounds for that. But what we have not done is, and you cannot, if you are a dropping group, you don't know who's going to be there. So there's no way that you can get everybody to sign something before they come in without putting a bar on the door. And we don't want to put that bar on the door.
Right. And I know even for some of our calls, if I sometimes am just like, at the beginning of the call, I'm saying this is being recorded. If anyone feels uncomfortable, please email me or message me in the chat. And then that way we know, hey, we're not going to post this anywhere.
Exactly. Yep. Perfect.
Awesome. All right. So then I do want to go back to, at one point you mentioned the peer-to-peer experience, which I know as a patient leader webinar, we know the peer-to-peer experience is everything, right? But when we're doing that, there's like this fine line kind of sharing that experience. I think the example that someone asked about was when your friend had experience with that medication and you asking him to share that. Is there like a fine line or any best practices for making sure that you're getting those experiences, but you're not maybe exploiting that maybe someone didn't feel comfortable with sharing that or something? I mean, in this case, it sounded like you knew the gentleman, so I don't think that's an issue. But on other cases, are there any like rules or kind of strategies you use to kind of guide that?
So I tend to know my participants. Not that they're always the same, and it gets tricky when I see somebody come into a meeting that hasn't been in a group for 6 or 8 months or whatever, but I have a feel for my participants. Mm-hmm. So I'm very aware of not putting a participant on the spot. I wouldn't be asking a participant necessarily about an ED med or an incontinence med in that way, I might say to them, is there anything you can share to help this man with a particular issue around incontinence? And most men are very happy to do that if they've been through it.
Right.
Rather than saying, how did a particular drug work for you? I might say, you know, you had a bit of an issue initially. Do you have anything that you could share about that? So it's some of it's about the way that you ask. Some of it is about knowing who you're asking, because you know some people are more verbal than others. And those who are not verbal, I try very hard to bring them into a meeting. Now we had a guy, a very dear guy to me, who he just died a week ago Friday. And he was dear to me because I'd been supporting him since 2013. And he was a youngish guy, not that young, but he was young enough. And he was always very quiet in the meetings, always. And I would say to him, Richard, can you, do you want to tell us a little bit? You've had great success with this drug. And it was like turning on a tap, you know? And once you gave him the floor, you couldn't get rid of him. And he would start from the beginning and it would be painful.
Oh gosh.
But he wouldn't come into the meeting himself. Anyway, my fratello, co-moderator Len and I, we were two teammates. So I would be sending Len a note saying, don't let Foodie go on too long, jump in, you know. But I didn't want to go through the whole meeting without acknowledging him. So it's a lot about just knowing your people.
Yeah, I think as a moderator, it is. I mean, a lot of these people don't have this outlet, right, to have this emotional conversation.
Exactly.
And so it's like we're playing moderator and we're also playing therapist and we're also kind of being the teacher all in one. So it is no joke to be a moderator. I have no doubts on that.
Well, it takes more skill than people think.
Yeah.
And it takes even more skill when you're doing it on a remote basis.
Yeah.
Because it isn't as easy and people don't respond to you exactly the same way as they would do if you were face to face. Just like I played that little trick on you with the silence, right?
Got us all.
And so and I did it because I want you to realize that virtual meetings may seem to be very similar, and we try to elicit the same sort of feeling that we have when we're sitting across the table from each other, but they're different.
Yeah, so I guess that we have a few more questions here, but if anyone else has questions in the group, drop them in the chat and I will be sure to get Rick to get you some answers. But I guess someone had asked, is it best to offer support groups virtually or in person? So right now I'm going to say the answer is virtually. But in general times when COVID is not a thing, do you find that? I mean, I think I know the answer, but I would love to hear from you.
So obviously I'm biased. And I've done both. I frankly think virtually, and the reason being that it's much more egalitarian. You know, we're open to everybody. Anybody can join us in a virtual meeting. And in a physical meeting, I'm already selecting because there are people with disabilities who can't join us. That's not fair.
Right.
And so I definitely feel a virtual meeting. I did want to say, by the way, you can write to me, info@ancan.org does get to me if anybody has questions. The AnCan YouTube, you can see all of our groups. Follow us on AnCan. That's our Facebook channel. So like us or whatever you do there, and follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, at the end of this
website.
At the end of this call, I wrote down my follow-ups like Rick told me to. So I will be sending out what requires you guys to work with AnCan. If you guys want to start your own virtual groups, I will send you that. Rick has been kind enough to put together a cheat sheet for everyone. So I will send that. And then of course I will send out all Rick's social information and email so that you guys can follow up with him of any questions. And like he says, whatever you do on each social channel, be sure to do that.
Yeah, and I really mean that if there are some of you out there who do want to start a group with us, we would love to do it. We'll work with you. We have 2 rooms right now. We're at capacity in one, and the other room is being used lightly, so we have plenty of capacity. And it's not a difficult process. We'll get you up and running.
No doubt in that. I do also want to say, I meant to say this at the beginning of this call, I apologize, but there will be a replay of this webinar. It will be on the platform in the next week. So if you guys want to go back to something or share it with someone, you'll be able to access it there. We do have a few more questions. We are having someone ask if your moderators get paid or is everyone volunteering? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, what a good question. So our business model is to try and get stipends for moderators, but we haven't been successful to date. We are very, very close. So we have enough money in the bank now to have credibility. And our plan is that as we raise sponsorship dollars going forward, we will try to pay stipends to moderators. We think it's really important. We just have to have the funds to do it. If you want to start a group and you think that you have access to funds to get your moderators paid, we will work with you as a 501c3 to raise that money and then use it to pay the moderators for your group. We don't have the funds ourselves to pay all our moderators as much as we want to. But we're almost there. You know, another couple of big grants and that is exactly what we plan to do.
Wonderful. All right. Let's see. Okay, so when you are working on determining a time for your webinar, do you, now I know it could be different community to community. Yeah. How are you doing that? Are you talking with attendees? Okay. Or are you just slating a time? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
So we're always balancing East Coast and West Coast, and it's difficult because a lot of our meetings start at 8 o'clock Eastern, but 8 o'clock Eastern is still 5 o'clock Pacific, and people are not at work at that point in time. When we split our group, our prostate cancer group, before we actually even went on to go to a meeting, the reason we did it was because we had a lot of East Coast guys and 8 o'clock was too late for them. They were all on hormone therapy, falling asleep. And so they said, we need another group. So we went to a Tuesday group, and so we were meeting on Mondays. Then we added a Tuesday group in the alternate week that started at 6 o'clock Eastern. So that we then had a choice, one 6 o'clock meeting, one 8 o'clock meeting. It's very, very difficult, but most of our meetings will start, the earliest we start would be 6 o'clock Eastern, and the latest we start for any meeting is 8:30 Eastern. So it's usually in there. All of our meetings at this point are Monday through Thursday. We have had weekend meetings. Weekend meetings are fine. We had a very successful brain tumor group. It was so successful that the moderators picked up and went after National Brain Tumor Association and set it up there, which after we trained them, which didn't please us that much, but we would love to get a breast cancer group growing. And on that note, some of you are thinking, why don't they have a women's breast cancer group? They have a men's breast cancer group. Well, we did, but we had moderators who were smart and good, but had no social media outreach, and they couldn't get people on the group. And it's a very, very competitive space, the women's breast cancer. Yeah. So we would love to restart a women's breast cancer group if we could find a partner that had the outreach.
Yeah. Well, these patient leaders on the call don't have a problem with that social media aspect. I know that for a fact. All right, we have time for a few more. So here is a good one. What equipment do you need to have a great webinar? Is there any, or a support group, is there any special equipment you use, obviously, other than the platforms that we discussed? Do you use anything?
Well, I have in the past. Let's see. This is a lamp that a buddy of mine, a photographer buddy of mine, gave me because I was having trouble with lighting issues. Right now, I have good natural light here. So for the purpose of what we're doing, this light works fine. I also have an arm lamp here, which I can play around with, which you sometimes might need. But by and large, the cameras are so good in the newer desktops and laptops that they will balance your lighting for you. Same thing with the microphones. So I don't have to use any special video camera. I don't need to use any special microphone. I do have more than one screen, and that is really helpful. Particularly in my case, because I use the camera is in a small, very portable laptop, which is usually closed. But I have to keep that screen open when I need the camera, and there's nowhere near enough real estate on that screen for me. So I've got a couple of other screens where I can keep things that I can look at. So I would say, by and large, no, I would not try to run a meeting off of an iPhone or a smartphone. There just isn't enough real estate on there for you, nor would I, even an iPad is really too small. And one other thing I should mention is be aware that the software, the displays, the moderating displays are different according to the browser and the platform that you're using. So the display on a Mac may not be the same as the display on a PC. So if you're trying to help somebody get on and they can't turn on their microphone or their video, where you think the button is to do it may not be what they're seeing. So that is, just bear that in mind. What we do is generally refer people back to technical support at GoToMeeting, because we're just not qualified to be the technical assistant for GoToMeeting on top of everything else.
On top of moderating the entire thing. That's fair. That's a fair assumption. Yeah, I mean, Jeff saying ring lights, like I know, oh geez.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, so ring lights, you can get them on Amazon pretty cheap.
Yeah.
I say that, but mine like broke this morning right before this call, so that was fun. But I typically use a ring light. I do have some good lighting. And then audio, like you said, I think it's our computers are pretty savvy at this point. It sounds pretty good. But I know a few of my colleagues either use like ear pods or like the olden day headphones that still had strings with a little microphone built in, and that seems to be fine if you've got dog barking in the background or kids or something like that. That tends to like mute out. But for the most part, I feel like if you got a computer, you can make this happen. It doesn't take much.
Yeah. You know, Kristen, you really raise a good point. I wasn't thinking about it because I live on my own, and so I don't have to worry about a lot of background noise, and I live in the middle of the country. But if you don't have a good internet connection, and we haven't really talked about this, but if you don't have a good internet connection, you can have difficulties. I just have point to point here. I don't have DSL. There's a satellite on top of the roof. But that means sometimes I do have to shut off my video in order to get good connection. One of my co-moderators is in Maui. He doesn't have good internet connection, and he's had a heck of a time getting good audio. So he's played with different computers different headphones. So yes, I guess equipment can be more of an issue that I have to think more broadly. You're right. It can be an issue, but usually there's a good workaround, and headphones with a mic can often be a very good solution.
Certainly. Yeah. All right. And then the last one, I thought this one was okay. And you kind of touched upon this in a way, but if someone signs up for your group, I know you said in your groups, people just sign up, right? If someone maybe is reoccurring joining and they don't really fit the demographic or they don't fit the condition area or something along that way, how do you handle that? Is it you reaching out to them one-on-one after the call? What would that look like if you've had that experience?
Well, this actually happens to us frequently, but let me just go back and say that the way people sign up for our groups is they go to the website and they go to a contact page and they click off which groups they want to receive a reminder for. Actually coming into the room requires no sign up. So anybody can come into the room at any time during the meeting. They don't have to give us notice. What they're signing up for is just a reminder notice that there's a meeting coming up. Now, we often face this issue with prostate cancer because we will have men that will come in to say are low intermediate risk and start talking about advanced issues. And it makes a lot of the other men in the room uncomfortable because they don't want to hear about what happens when the treatment fails.
Right.
That's usually, not always, but that's usually because you can be diagnosed de novo advanced, de novo metastatic, but a lot of times there's a progression. And that man who has progression, we don't want him talking to people that are newly diagnosed because it can really throw them for a loop. Mm-hmm. And we will jump in even during a meeting and say, these are very valid issues. This isn't the right meeting for you, but we do have that meeting. It meets next Monday, but we will strongly recommend. And most men will turn around and say, oh, thank you, and that's fine. We've had other issues with our ovarian group. The women wanted to make the ovarian group women only, ovarian cancer group, women only, very understandably. We love to welcome caregivers into our group. We have a specific caregivers group for any caregiver with advanced cancer, which we keep patients out of for the same reason that sometimes you have to keep patients, you have to keep certain people out of other groups. But by and large, most of our groups, we welcome caregivers. We couldn't welcome caregivers to our ovarian cancer group because they didn't want men. And we've actually had to turn men away and say, join our advanced cancer group. That's a pan-cancer group. So we welcome people with any type of cancer. Right. But I think that there's nothing wrong with turning somebody away, provided you have a solution for them. It's difficult to turn somebody away when you don't have a solution for them. But if you say, if you have another time that you can help them, or you know, and the solution may be, as you said, I'll call you, you know, let's talk later. Let me have your email, send me your number, what have you. But I don't think you need to worry too much about turning people away as long as there's some sort of follow-up for them and you're not leaving them in the lurch.
Yeah. Yeah. Even saying, hey, I see that there's a need for this. Maybe we can work on creating a new group if you don't have one.
Yeah. Definitely.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I know we are at our time, and I just asked you a million questions, so thank you. But really great information, some information that is really just like top of mind for so many patient leaders right now. And I know we have a lot of leaders on this call that have talked to us about how excited they are to get this going. So as I said, all of our attendees, I will send out an email right after this call. It will have Rick's famous cheat sheet so you can become a pro, try to aspire to be like him, as well as Rick's info about AnCan, and that I will alert, that we will put the replay on the platform as well. Oh man. All right. So with that being said, thank you guys for joining. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself, or as Rick said, info@ancan.org. And with that, again, thank you, Rick. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and helping us become a stronger community.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. All right, guys, have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.